временных правил процедуры Совета я приглашаю принять участие в данном заседании представителей Германии и Украины. Решение принимается. На основании правила 39 временных правил процедуры Совета я приглашаю принять участие в данном заседании заместителя генерального секретаря по политическим вопросам и вопросам миростроительства госпожу Розмари де Карло. Решение принимается. Сейчас Совет Безопасности приступит к рассмотрению пункта 2 повестки дня. Я предоставляю слово госпоже Розмари де Карло.
Thank you. Mr. President, it's with great concern and sadness that I brief the Council this evening on the unfolding dangerous situation in and around Ukraine. In his statement today, the Secretary General was clear. The Secretary General considers the decision of the Russian Federation to recognize the independence of certain areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions to be a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We very much regret this decision, which risks having regional and global repercussions. We also regret the order to deploy Russian troops into eastern Ukraine, reportedly on a peacekeeping mission. These developments follow the decision to order a mass evacuation of civilian residents of Donetsk and Luhansk into the Russian Federation. We are concerned by the escalating shelling across the contact line, reportedly leading to a number of casualties. OSCE's Special Monitoring Mission has recorded a total of 3,231 ceasefire violations in the Donbas area from 18 to 20 February, 1,073 ceasefire violations, including 926 explosions in the Luhansk region, and 2,158 ceasefire violations, including 1,100 explosions in Donetsk region. We remind all involved of their responsibilities under international humanitarian law and human rights law. Although the United Nations is not in a position to verify the numerous claims and allegations made by various actors, we are deeply concerned about the reports of civilian casualties, targeting of civilian infrastructure, and ongoing evacuations. Mr. President, we are extremely concerned about the possible implications of the latest developments for the existing negotiation frameworks. Amid the current risks and uncertainty, it is even more important to pursue dialogue. Negotiation is the only way to address the existing differences among the key actors regarding regional security issues and the settlement of the conflict in eastern Ukraine in accordance with Security Council Resolution 2202. Before the current already dangerous conditions escalate further, we call on all relevant actors to focus their efforts on an immediate cessation of hostilities. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected, and actions and statements that may worsen the situation must be avoided. Over the past few weeks, key actors have been engaged in intense diplomatic efforts to avert a new eruption of conflict in the heart of Europe. The Secretary General fully supports these efforts and has deplored even the possibility that a new conflict could break out. Mr. President, we are committed to our long-term partnership with Ukraine, a founding member of the United Nations, as it continues to pursue the democratic reform agenda 30 years after independence. And once again, we reiterate the full commitment of the United Nations to the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, according to General Assembly resolutions. Throughout the 8 years of conflict in eastern Ukraine, the United Nations has continued to provide life-saving humanitarian support to all in need, as well as human rights-related work. During this difficult period, we are committed to stay and deliver and remain fully operational in Ukraine, including in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The safety and security of our staff must be respected by all parties. Mr. President, the next hours and days will be critical. The risk of major conflict is real and needs to be prevented at all costs. I can assure you of the full commitment of the Secretary General to work toward a diplomatic resolution of the current crisis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Я благодарю.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the Permanent Representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since World War II, the United Nations Charter, the key tenets of which this council is mandated to uphold, has stood as a bulwark to the worst impulses of empires and autocrats. Earlier today, Russia's President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia will recognize as independent states the so-called DPR and LPR regions, the sovereign territory of Ukraine, an area controlled by Russia's proxies since 2014. He has since announced that he will place Russian troops in these regions. He calls them peacekeepers. This is nonsense. We know what they really are. In doing so, he has put before the world a choice. We must meet the moment, and we must not look away. History tells us that looking the other way in the face of such hostility will be a far more costly path. Russia's clear attack on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is unprovoked. It is an attack on Ukraine's status as a UN member state. It violates a basic principle of international law, and it defies our charter. What is more, this move by President Putin is clearly the basis for Russia's attempt to create a pretext for a further invasion of Ukraine. The consequences of this action will be felt far beyond Ukraine's borders. We do not have to guess at President Putin's motives. Today, President Putin made a series of outrageous false claims about Ukraine aimed at creating a pretext for war, and immediately thereafter announced Russian troops are entering the Donbass. He claimed that Ukraine is seeking nuclear weapons from the West. This is not true. Ukraine is, in fact, one of only 4 countries to have voluntarily surrendered their nuclear weapons. The United States and our allies have no intention of supplying nuclear weapons to Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't want them. And then President Putin asserted that Russia today has a rightful
Emergency meeting given the extreme gravity of the situation. France condemns Russia's recognition of the separatist eastern regions of Ukraine. This is not just a further attack on the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine, but it is also a violation of the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter, of Resolution 2202 of this Council, which endorsed the Minsk agreements, and the commitments undertaken by Russia, which were confirmed at the very highest level these last few days. On the 17th of February, the Russian representative publicly acknowledged before this Council that there is no alternative to the Minsk agreements and that they were the only internationally recognized legal basis to solve the conflict in Ukraine. But today, the reality is quite different. Russia is choosing the path of confrontation in spite of the incessant efforts to achieve a de-escalation over the last few weeks and the last few days, notably by President Macron working with the German Chancellor. We are continuing these efforts, and we call on Russia to match its words with its deeds when it claims to be in favor of dialogue, and to go back on its decision to recognize the separatist entities. With our European partners, we are preparing targeted sanctions against those who took part in this illegal decision. In the context of the heightened tensions on Ukraine's borders provoked by the strengthening of Russian military activity, we are concerned by this additional step in the destabilization by Russia and by the threat that weighs on European security. France welcomes the restraint that Ukraine has shown in these difficult circumstances. We express our full solidarity with the people and the government of Ukraine. We call on Russia to refrain from any other actions of destabilization, notably those that may undermine the security and the safety of civilian populations and put them in danger. We are particularly concerned by the decision of President Putin to send the army to the separatist territories under the pretext of peacekeeping. This would be another flagrant violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity. President, France will continue to mobilize in support of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France. I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. We have been closely following the evolving developments relating to Ukraine, including developments along the eastern border of Ukraine and the related announcement by the Russian Federation. The escalation of tension along the border of Ukraine with the Russian Federation is a matter of deep concern. These developments have the potential to undermine peace and security of the region. We call for restraint on all sides. The immediate priority is de-escalation of tensions, taking into account the legitimate security interests of all countries and aimed towards securing long-term peace and stability in the region and beyond. We are convinced that this issue can only be resolved through diplomatic dialogue. We need to give space to the recent initiatives undertaken by parties which seek to diffuse tensions. In this context, we welcome the intense efforts underway, including through the Trilateral Contact Group and under the Normandy format. We need parties to exert greater efforts to bridge divergent interests. We cannot afford to have a military escalation. As we have emphasized before, the Minsk agreements provide a basis for a negotiated and peaceful settlement, and we need greater efforts to find common ground to facilitate the implementation of the provisions of the Minsk agreements, including key security and political aspects. As we have time and again emphasized, constructive diplomacy is the need of the hour to avoid scaling up of tensions. The safety and security of civilians are essential. More than 20,000 Indian students and nationals live and study in different parts of Ukraine, including in its border areas. The well-being of Indian nationals is a priority to us. In conclusion, we strongly emphasize the vital need for all sides to maintain international peace and security by exercising the utmost restraint and intensifying diplomatic efforts to ensure that a mutually amicable solution is arrived at the earliest. I thank you.
I thank
of the independence of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, and issued a decree to send Russian military forces into Ukraine as so-called peacekeepers. Colleagues, the actions Russia has chosen today will have severe and far-reaching consequences. First, to human life. An invasion of Ukraine unleashes the forces of war, death, and destruction on the people of Ukraine. The humanitarian impact will be terrible on civilians fleeing the fighting. We know that women and children will suffer most. Second, to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a UN member state, which is protected and guaranteed by the UN Charter. As the Secretary-General said earlier, Russia's decisions are a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the UN Charter. Third, to international law. The actions taken today make mockery of the commitments Russia has made through the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk Agreements, endorsed by Security Council Resolution 2202. In seeking to redraw borders by force, Russia's actions show blatant contempt for international law. The United Kingdom will be announcing new sanctions on Russia in response to its breach of international law and attack on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. There will be severe economic consequences to its actions. Colleagues, now more than ever, the Council must shoulder its responsibilities for peace and security and defend the principles of the UN Charter. The Council must be united in calling on Russia to de-escalate immediately, in condemning aggression against a
Undersecretary, it is with unease that I will now remove my mask. And it is not because of the COVID virus. We are all vaccinated. There are vaccines for COVID. It is because of the virus that has so far no vaccine. The virus that hit the United Nations, and the virus that is spread by the Kremlin. The delegation of Ukraine has requested this urgent meeting to draw the attention of the Security Council to the illegal and illegitimate decision by the President of the Russian Federation to recognize the occupied parts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine as so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. Today, the entire membership of the United Nations is under attack by the country that occupied the membership of the Security Council in 1991, bypassing the UN Charter. The country that occupied parts of the territory of Georgia in 2008. The country that occupied parts of Ukraine in 2014. As stated by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, following the urgent meeting of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine have been and will remain unchangeable, regardless of any statements and actions by the Russian Federation. Ukraine unequivocally qualifies the recent actions by the Russian Federation as violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The political leadership of the Russian Federation shall bear full responsibility for the outcomes of the decision taken. Recognition of the occupied parts of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine may be considered as unilateral withdrawal by Russia from the Minsk agreements, and well as its disregard of the decisions taken in the framework of the Normandy Fall. This step undermines peaceful efforts and ruins the existing negotiating frameworks. By the decisions adopted today and those that may be adopted tomorrow, Russia legalizes the presence of its troops, which have actually been in the occupied areas of Donbass since 2014. A country that has fueled the war for 8 years is not able to maintain peace as it claims. What will happen next? We want peace, and we are consistent in our actions. Today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine has sent a request on the basis of the Budapest Memorandum to the guarantors of security of Ukraine, demanding immediate consultations. The meeting of the UN Security Council and the special meeting of the OEC have been initiated. We insist on the full-fledged operations of the OEC SMM to prevent provocations and further escalation. An emergency summit of Normandy 4 has been requested. We expect from our partners clear and efficient steps of support. It is critical to see now who is our true friend and partner, who is on the side of the UN Charter, and who will continue to deter Russia by words only. We are committed to a political diplomatic settlement and do not succumb to provocations. In accordance with Article 51 of the Charter, Ukraine has the inherent right to individual and collective self-defense. We are committed to a peaceful and diplomatic path, and we will stay firmly on it. We are on our land. We are not afraid of anything or anyone. We owe nothing to anyone, and we will not give away anything to anyone. There should be no doubts whatsoever, because it is not February 2014. It is February 2022. Another country, another army. One goal is peace. Peace in Ukraine, peace in Europe, global peace. Excellencies, we must do all we can to make sure that the problem of Donbass is resolved through implementation of the Minsk agreements. That was said here in the Security Council chamber just 4 days ago, said by the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister in the chair of the President of the Council, with a reference to President Putin. President Putin, who has taken a decision that we discussed today as a threat to the rules-based order, to the UN Charter, in particular Article 2 of the Charter, as well as to international peace and security. Peace and security that the Council has been conferred a primary responsibility to maintain under the Article 24 of the UN Charter. And in accordance with the Article 39, the Security Council shall make recommendations or decide what measures shall be taken to maintain or restore international peace and security. The delegation of Ukraine requests the Security Council members to exercise the above duties. We invite the Russian Federation to reread again and again, carefully, today's statement, where the Secretary General considered the decision of the Russian Federation to be a violation of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, and I thank the Secretary General for this powerful statement. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that it remains up to Russia to abandon its long-lasting strategy on Ukraine based on threat and use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of my country, and re-engage in what we all have committed to, fundamental principles of peaceful relations enshrined in the UN Charter. We demand from Russia to cancel the decision on recognition and return to the table of negotiations. We condemn the order to deploy additional Russian occupation troops in the territories of Ukraine. We demand immediate and complete verifiable withdrawal of the occupation troops. Dear members of the Security Council, the United Nations is sick. That's a matter of fact. It's been hit by the virus spread by the Kremlin. Will it succumb to this virus? It is in the hands of the membership. Today, the Kremlin copy-pasted word by word the decree on Georgia of 2008. Word by word, copy-pasted, copy-pasted. No creativity whatsoever. The copying machine in Kremlin works very well. Who is the next among the members of the United Nations?